Hey everyone, my name is Micah Blake, and in this video we're going to be going over 5 different pros and cons to doing private lessons. Mostly piano is what I do, but it's really the same for any music lessons. Piano, guitar, things will differ if you have a really big instrument like a harp or something, but in general, these pros and cons will be the same for all of them. On this channel, we do a lot of tutorials on how to do music, either as a student or as a teacher. Also different tips and tricks about music in general. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, subscribe because I'm going to be posting every week new content to help you in your business or in your practice. Before we get into the pros and cons, we really have to understand, why do we actually want to teach music? In my experience, there's been about 4 different reasons. Some people just love music and they hate their job. So they think, I hate this and I love this, so I guess I might as well do what I love for work. Totally makes sense. What you have to understand before you get into it is it's not always going to be what you love about music that you'll be doing every day. There's a lot more to it than that, but I still think that's a completely valid reason to decide to teach private lessons. Now, another huge thing for private lessons is there is a flexibility of your schedule. There is so much that you can do around in your home, between lessons and stuff like that, where if you have a normal 9 to 5, you're never going to be able to do that. That's another reason a lot of people like to do private lessons. Other people like to have the one-on-one experience. This was a big reason for me. I decided to not get my education degree because I knew that it would be an easy fallback for me to decide to teach like high school music at a public school. And for me personally, I would just die if I had to do that all the time. Having a classroom full of people who don't really want to learn necessarily, I would rather do the one-on-one and really get a relationship with each of my students and have that fun exchange. That's actually the next reason. The 4th reason is you actually want to teach kids who want to learn, or adults. When you're doing just a classroom, you don't have the ability to have all different age groups. Usually you're just doing like a certain age, a certain style, and this gives you the flexibility to really work with people on their level. So those are the main reasons I think people start. So now let's get into the 5 pros and cons. Now I set this up as each of your pros has a dark side to it. So each of your pros also has a con. So the first reason is there's actually good money in private lessons. I know a lot of people think of that musician who's teaching lessons as kind of being one level above like living on the street. You're pretty much unemployed, but you teach lessons. And that's actually not true. Those are just kind of the failures. In private lessons, the average across America for a half-hour lesson is either $25 to $50 an hour for private lessons. Obviously, this differs based on how good of a teacher and how good you are at your instrument, but a lot of it really depends on your area. You may have to move to or drive to a more affluent area in the city to get those prices and to get the people who can actually pay that. But if you want to do this for a career, you're not going to be able to just have the $5 an hour type of lessons all the time and expect to actually be able to make a living. You can make quite a bit of money. So for me personally, I had a maximum of 53 students that I taught every week at one point in my career, and that was pretty much maxing me out. Not all of those were half an hour. Some of them were an hour. But even if they were a half an hour, if you just do the math, you're like, oh, 50 students for half an hour, that's 25 hours. That's not working very much in the week, but each student has a little bit of time that I have to prepare for what their next lesson is going to be, because I don't just work through a book, I work through each student personally so that they're getting what they need. And that takes more mental capacity and prep work and stuff. So I really was doing about 40 or more hours a week. Also, if you're including driving time, not all of those were at my house. So money-wise, it can be a really good career, especially if you're adding different things onto that besides just the normal one-on-one lessons. So what's the con? The pro is there is good money. The con is it's inconsistent. People always get worried about losing their job, getting laid off. I kind of used to joke that I get laid off like every single month. There's always someone who's leaving and there's someone who's coming. That's just the life of a musician in general, but definitely the life of a teacher. So you get some inconsistencies, especially like for our area. In January till June was like great. Everyone's on schedule, no one's forgetting classes, and then through June through August, it's terrible because everyone's on vacation through the summer. And then through August to December is pretty inconsistent. We have some big holidays in the US, like Thanksgiving, people travel for Christmas, of course. There's all these weird time off from school, and it's just inconsistent. And also people don't always want to take classes between November and December because there's so much going on. So there is some issues, inconsistencies with the money, which means really all it means is you have to be better with money. You have to budget for those times. And that first year when you're not sure how it's going to work out can be very frustrating. But as long as you have a basic understanding of budgeting, you should be fine with this. Okay, so second reason that is a pro to teaching one-on-one lessons is you're actually changing lives. Now, it seems kind of like a cliche, but it's really the truth of it. You are giving something into these people's lives that they can't get other places, or they're not getting other places at least. It's really great to be able to open up a world to someone who otherwise would never have been able to go there. Now, this doesn't happen every single day, but being able to work with people in that way is extremely rewarding, much more than the average American's 9 to 5. So what's the con of that? You're changing people's lives, but you also become their therapist. Now, therapists make usually over 100 an hour, and you're not making that. But oftentimes, there's a lot of that allotted of your schedule just talking about their lives, because Americans are overstressed, and being able to sit down in a nice, tranquil environment and play something that they really like allows them to open up. And when you open up, the good stuff and the bad stuff comes pouring out. And as long as you aren't like an idiot, then you have the capability of sitting there and listening and letting them get this out. Because as a musician, you have to get that out. That's part of the stuff that drives us in music, and being able to help them work through these things is a part of helping them with music, but it can be very draining. You have to figure out how to let all of their crap go and get off of you before you go back to your normal life. Now, our third pro and con to this is working from home. Now, this is going to differ for each person. If people are in apartments, it's going to have a different pro and a different con. But in general, working from home, I think, is a great thing. It takes one step above for actually having like the responsibility to have everything ready in your home, to have it clean, to be changed and ready on time. There's a lot of good things to it as long as you can have that little buffer of being ready, and that just takes Some musicians I know totally don't have that, and so maybe it's best if they taught private lessons in a studio or something. But in general, I have more time with my family. We homeschool our kids, so they're home, and I have more time to spend with them in that 15, 20 minutes, half an hour in between lessons. I can go out in the yard and play with them, whereas if I'm at a studio and I have a half hour off, I'm just sitting there doing nothing or working on more music or whatever. So having working at home as an option is a huge benefit. But what's the con of it? Is sometimes students just don't leave, and this is really awkward. So you did your half hour lesson, there's no one right after them, so you have a break, and they just kind of hang around at your house. So you're their teacher, you're their friend, and you really have to set a boundary of walking them to the door and saying, thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next week, and kind of gently pushing them out the door. Because if not, they will just stay and talk and have coffee with you. Or if they have kids, they'll play with your kids and all of that. And all of a sudden, your entire day is no longer yours. Now, if you're that type of person who loves it, that's great. I'm not always. I would actually rather be like, oh, this is my time for work, this is my time for play, and be done with it. So that's definitely a con depending on who you are and depending on how you run your household. Okay, so our fourth reason is there's some really exciting breakthroughs for yourself and for your students. I tell people who want to become better musicians to teach, because you will not understand things better than when you are actually sitting down with your students and teaching them, because you have to think of it in a different way, and it will always be there after that. It is so much easier to learn certain things when you teach someone else. Even my kids, sometimes I'll have one of my kids teach the other kid something just so that the one who's teaching will learn it better. It's that important. But also with your students. Sometimes you'll be practicing something for a really long time, and all of a sudden, bam, they just get it. And that's a really exciting experience. And seeing the joy that that creates is huge. That will totally make your day or your week or your month or whatever, depending on how it is. So that is a huge benefit to having those one-on-one teachings. Whereas if you're in a classroom or a normal 9-to-5 job, you may not even see that all the time because there's too many people, or because you're doing a terrible job that you shouldn't be in the first place. But there is a con to that too. The con is most of the time you're not having those breakthroughs. You need to work them the normal day-to-day practices. And as a musician, we should be used to that. We do a lot of routine, we do a lot of practice, and some people just think that's really boring. But you need to keep doing those practices every day, or else you don't get the breakthroughs. So trying to keep the kids encouraged, or the adults or anyone encouraged while you're doing those one-on-one lessons when they're not having breakthroughs yet can be very draining on you, because you know it's coming. It's inevitable. Like any business you're doing, if you're doing the right things and you keep doing it, it is inevitable that you will get to the place you want to be at. But just because something's inevitable doesn't mean it's imminent. Doesn't mean it's going to happen today. It may happen in quite a while from now. So understanding that this is the way it works. Every day, day-to-day aspects turn into breakthroughs eventually. Understanding that at the beginning can really help you get through those doldrums. All right, so the fifth pro and con of being a private teacher is you are self-employed. There are so many benefits to being self-employed. I became self-employed about 4 or 5 years ago, and in my opinion, yes, I'll get a job if I need to, here or there. I've definitely had jobs because they're like, well, if you're going to do this work for us, you have to be an employee. whatever. It's not a big deal. But in general, I never want a job again. Being self-employed has so many benefits, from flexibility to doing what you want to having the capability of growing to whatever your limits are. When you're employed, you're waiting for that one time a year to get a bonus, or if you're a salesperson, you're radically trying to get more sales and that's the only way you can get commission or whatever. And with self-employed, it's unlimited. Now, I think as a musician, this makes sense. We're creative people. We should be able to create what we want. If we want more money, we'll create a way to do that. I mean, that's the point of music. It's creation. We are people who have that ability. So be self-employed. Now, with that is the con of there's just a lot of work in being self-employed. And if you can't put in that work, then you're going to have some problems. Some of that work is you have to have paperwork ready. You have to have that organized. You have to be able to do your taxes, or at least have everything ready to tell your tax person what you did for taxes. That can be very difficult for a lot of people. And also, being self-employed, you work a lot of jobs. I was doing 53 students at one point, but that wasn't my norm. Sometimes it would drop. Sometimes it would, even when I had 53 students, I had other opportunities. So I was like, I totally have to take these because they're things that I want. Just because I'm busy doesn't make that a difference. So sometimes you're working more than you want because that's just the time in the season. I probably worked 5 or 10 different music things all at the same time. And sometimes they were things that didn't get paid right away. So it'd be later on, I'd be getting the money for it. But for me, I actually really like that. If I'm doing the exact same thing every single day, even if it's as exciting as having breakthroughs with personal students, I do tend to get bored. And I know this is a weakness of myself, but I'm pretty sure musicians are typically like this. We are musicians because we like to see the new thing. We like to learn the new song. We don't want to do the same thing every single day. Actually, one of the reasons I started music lessons online was because that first 6 months of I know nothing about piano to 6 months of lessons kind of started wearing on me, because it's exactly the same thing. I'm not teaching them anything about myself. I'm just teaching them about this instrument and the basics of how to learn it. So I thought, you know what? I should just make a video of how to learn those 6 months, because I would rather get that student after they took my 6 months of lessons, not get paid for those 6 months, but be able to start at a more interesting level for myself. As a musician, that's what I want. I want to be able to show them the songs they want to play and all this stuff. And if they're just learning where to find middle C, that's not creative enough for me. So that is another con of being self-employed. So I hope those 5 reasons were really helpful for you. Once again, there's good money, but also inconsistent money. You're changing people's lives, but also you become their therapist. You get to work from home, but sometimes people just won't leave your home. You have exciting breakthroughs, and you also have the normal day-to-day work. And lastly, you are self-employed, but sometimes that's way more work and you're doing way more than one job. So if you're thinking of becoming a teacher, consider these 5 pros and cons for an educational understanding. Not because I think I wrote these out, now you obviously understand what you're doing, but to know where your level of acceptance is. What's your threshold of I need this exciting and paying a lot, or what's your threshold of this is just too inconsistent for me and I won't be able to stand it. having that knowledge beforehand will help you become the teacher that you should be and be able to really stick it out, because this is something that you may have to take a year to build up your client base. And if you can't even last a year, then that's going to be a big problem for you. So thank you so much for watching this video. Once again, subscribe to this channel in order to get awesome tips like this every week. Also equipment guides and just tips of being a student and being a teacher. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.